One story of the sun is very interesting, and it is the story of Surya and his wife. This story is relevant to Uttara Phalguni, which is a nakshatra that is both solar but also interested in relationships, and it is the specific point of contemplation for this video. Surya and his wife were very much in love, but Surya was too hot. Literally, to be around him was unbearable because he would shine so brightly and his rays were so scorching that even his own wife could not stand his presence for too long. Despite loving him deeply, it was to such a point that she had to run away from him. Despite her admiration for him, his presence was suffocating, his light was blinding, his aura was a life of its own that took up too much space. The sun wishes to give love, but its love is too overwhelming, which results in its rejection. We observe this unfortunate contrast in this nakshatra, the nakshatra of commitment, but also one which relates a lot to independence and freedom. A nakshatra of union, but also one that requires and takes up so much space that there isn't enough room for everyone in the relationship. This is a theme for Uttara Phalguni, a nakshatra that can carry themes of being more beloved by strangers than by those closest to them. Contemplating this story brings one many insights into many of the more real-life themes of this asteroid. Before we move on into the personality section, I kindly ask that you like, subscribe, and comment on my video in order to support me. I also ask that you join my Patreon, where there are many more articles on astrology and mysticism. First of all, we will speak of their indifference to convention and the radiance of their individuality. For example, an Uttara Phalguni woman may dress herself in ways that generally society considers odd or outlandish, but her irreverence allows her to be true to her aesthetic. Another Uttara Phalguni woman could dress in a way that others considered immature or too girly to be taken seriously, but her reduced relationship to other people's opinions allows her this freedom of expression. And yet another Uttara Phalguni man could like to dress up like a pirate and walk around with a parrot on his shoulder and paint his hair blue or green or pink or whatever other unnatural color. In Uttara Phalguni, the individuality and the personality shines, but it can also shine so brightly as to be off-putting and uncomfortable and sometimes even irritating to those around them. Again, because general society demands of each person that he or she minimizes themselves so as to not make uncomfortable those around them. This is again another reason why this nakshatra tends to have something of a polarizing effect on other people. Uttara Phalguni women can be especially disliked by people in society, particularly by other women, because many of them will not even pretend to be humble or modest, as of course society demands of all people, but especially women, to at least put on the performance of meekness and loneliness. Uttara Phalguni women can be perceived by others as offensively confident, not even because they are acting rude or saying anything scandalous, but just on the basis of her aura. The Uttara Phalguni woman could be calm and polite and technically not be doing anything socially wrong. But because she radiates such natural self-assuredness and is naturally assertive, this sort of behavior can still rub many people the wrong way because she openly goes against the expectations of female deportment and is, of course, indifferent to the social pressures to act coy and shy. Sometimes it seems as though there is absolutely no trace of timidity or fear or nervousness or general neuroticism within the Uttara Phalguni woman, which can slightly intimidate both men and women. Some comments you can sometimes hear from other people, particularly other women, regarding Uttara Phalguni women is, "Who does she think she is?" or "She thinks she's all that." Because again, this is how slightly aggravating and even intimidating this level of self-belief can feel. The men and the women often also shamelessly engage in self-praise. It's not that they necessarily compare themselves to other people, but they just personally think of themselves as incredible and awesome and marvelous. And even when they do not verbalize how awesome they think they are, you once again see it in their posture and general deportment, as they do tend to walk tall, walk with pride, walk with a little bit of style, and yes, walk like they're on a red carpet or a fashion catwalk. Again, they're not the sort of people to compare themselves and make other people feel bad, But through their behavior, the men of Uttara Phalguni often inspire admiration from other men because of how effortlessly individual they are. And the women of Uttara Phalguni, once again, on a personal level, tend to inspire some irritation in other women, again, for daring to defy the social convention of shyness and meekness. I say on a personal level because, as celebrities, Uttara Phalguni women tend to be more admired. This nakshatra tends to do better with strangers than with family members or with very close relationships, because in some ways the people closest to them can feel overshadowed by the Uttara Phalguni native. Sometimes those closest to them can feel like no matter how intelligent or competent or how well behaved they are, all the Uttara Phalguni native has to do is smile or tell a joke, and everyone instantly likes them better. This nakshatra on a personal level can create some tension, but people tend to appreciate them more from the far. Both the men and the women tend to love the idea of having a flexible body. They are often drawn to athleticism and particularly dance because they love the idea of the body as an instrument, more than singing, more than playing an instrument. They tend to be drawn to the physical body as their main mode of expression. They may even like the idea of being actors because playing a character also gives them the opportunity to experiment with body language and general movements. They love the idea of charisma of movement or charisma of motion, essentially displays of personality and individuality through mannerisms, hand gestures, fast movements, slow movements, rough movements, elegant movements, etc. Actually, one of the main ways they tend to stand out from the crowd is through movement, as even from the far, even from just the way that they walk, they can do so in a way that calls attention. Perhaps their walk is naturally graceful, like a dancer turned fashion model, strutting down the catwalk. Perhaps they stomp the floor as they stride along the sidewalk. Other ways their movement can stand out is the men more specifically can be very open and expressive with their gestures. In general, they enjoy to keep a light frame as this facilitates spontaneous movements, something they value greatly. Their movements can sometimes be so open and spontaneous that they may accidentally infringe on the boundaries of other people. Uttara Phalguni natives can tend to get into trouble from just innocently being themselves. Since they don't like to limit themselves or to stop themselves from giving into spontaneous impulses to do things for the fun of doing them, they are often slow to realize that their spontaneous actions can lead to a lot of inconvenience to others. For example, an Uttara Phalguni man could be walking down the street and see a lost dog and spontaneously get the impulse to bring him home. But this sudden act of whimsy leads to a lot of logistical inconvenience for his family, who then are tasked with the more practical matters of finding a place for the dog to sleep, feeding the dog, etc. Another Uttara Phalguni native could wake up one day with a sudden flight of fancy to paint the living room crazy colors. She runs to the paint store, buys an assortment of paints that may not necessarily go together, come back home and turn her walls into an amateur abstract painting project. But this sudden action then causes a lot of disturbance for the people she lives with, who now have to contend with this sudden change, the disorganized furniture, the harsh smells of fresh paints, etc. And yet another Uttara Phalguni man could be so eccentric as to suddenly book a trip out of town, but his excitement for this new journey may overwhelm him so much that he does not take into account how much money he has to eat, where he's going, or where he will sleep. Instead, he figures these details out as he goes. And though to him this is perfectly fine, it becomes a cause of concern for his loved ones who worry at every second for his well-being. It is this spontaneity of feeling, these sudden flights of fancy, these impulses to wander about that make being around them simultaneously very thrilling, but at times quite frustrating. They make wonderful friends because of their lightness and playfulness, but they can be very difficult to actually live with, owing to the amount of physical and psychological space they take up. They have such large identities, such big personalities, whether it be that they enjoy very loud music at random times of day, which disturbs another person's peace, or that they are constantly inviting their friends over, such that one's home is no longer one's own, or they may love animals and are constantly adopting different types of animals, but not necessarily taking good care of them, which then becomes inconvenience for everyone living with them. etc., etc. They do not naturally understand that in order to coexist with another person, you have to know how to limit yourself so that the other person may also have some space to stretch themselves out. One of the more common characteristics of this nakshatra is how often they borrow without asking, or sometimes even flat out steal from other people, which to them is often not a big deal because of their reduced attachment to objects. But this is another one of those instances where their indifference to social norms aggravates other people greatly, to the point where collectively people come together to chastise, criticize, and punish the Uttara Phalguni native for behaviors that the Uttara Phalguni native themselves sees nothing wrong in. This nakshatra, only second to Uttarashada, is the most socially shamed, the most socially disciplined. It is the nakshatra that most provokes other people to correct and chastise it. In fact, it is very common for both Uttara Phalguni and Uttarashada to be treated like criminals even from a young age because they are constantly defying social norms and feigning ignorance. As children, they can act like juvenile delinquents, and as adults, again, they can be treated like felons. But despite this sort of behavior, people can generally sense that deep down they are not malicious or malevolent. They behave badly not because they are bad people, but because they simply are less socially aware and also care less about these sort of things. So, though they are the most punished by society, people in society tend to be very quick to forgive them and accept them back. They are the types of people that prefer to do things without asking for permission and then just apologize later if they get in trouble. They are the naughty children that are always getting into trouble, but because they seem so charming, are very good at making people laugh, and are generally speaking seen as charismatic, people often are quick to forgive them and let go of their sins. In fact, one of the reasons they can continue to behave badly well into adulthood is because they know the power of their charm and how it can inspire forgiveness quickly in others. One type of person that can really start to hate Uttara Phalguni natives are precisely those children and those individuals that try their best to follow the rules of society, try their best to be good members of society. They can hate the Uttara Phalguni natives because despite how much they themselves try to be good and law-abiding people, they find that everyone else still loves and respects the Uttara Phalguni native much more, despite the fact that the Uttara Phalguni native is the rule breaker. And so those who are law-abiding can grow to resent the rule-breaking Uttara Phalguni for simultaneously being dismissive towards society's rules, and yet at the same time, people still love and respect them anyways. Again, this is very much how people treat celebrities, as Uttara Phalguni is more so the celebrity aspect of Leo. Uttara Phalguni is shameless when it comes to expressing anything they think and anything they feel. And this is especially the case when it comes to declarations of love. Now, different nakshatras are good at romantic gestures, but it is important to really describe the different ways this asterism goes about it. And for this, we can compare it to Purva Phalguni. When Purva Phalguni performs romantic gestures, it is romantic in the more traditional and passionate sense. Dressing in sexy lingerie when your partner comes back from work, lighting incense, preparing a nice dinner, etc. Usually when people think of romantic gestures, they think of them as foreplay, as a precursor to actual sex. But the romantic declarations of Uttara Phalguni serve less the purpose of sexual arousal and is more so just a childlike demonstration of how much the other person means to them. So for instance, the Uttara Phalguni native could write a poem about the first time he met his partner, or could hire people to do a flash mob at the mall to his partner's favorite song, or could learn how to sing in order to perform his partner's favorite song, or could print t-shirts of pictures they took together on their first dates. So the declarations are not necessarily sexy, nor do they serve the purpose of sexually exciting their partner, but again are often just very sincere, often silly, often playful, often charming demonstrations of deep affection. Different Uttara Phalguni natives evolve different attitudes towards society's misunderstanding of their loud personalities, their spontaneous yet unruly displays of affection, and overall solar individuality. Some Uttara Phalguni natives maintain their indifference towards society, continuing to be joyfully childlike despite the complaints of some of those around them, but others often become bitter and proceed to force their personalities to become smaller and even develop a Scrooge-like mentality where they begin to resent the outside world for rejecting them and their natural selves and their natural way of expressing love. This more negative expression of Uttara Phalguni can develop a hate towards relationships, believing that love and romance are simply a wonderful illusion, that there is no such thing as a relationship where two people can love each other for being unashamedly themselves. They begin to believe relationships are a falsity and that all people in relationships are miserable, pathetic, and so desperately dependent on one another that they are willing to castrate themselves to remain in a relationship. And this more negative expression of Uttara Phalguni can develop superficial philosophies of not needing other people. They can even take pride in not having intimate relationships, perceiving them as a form of weakness. They can cut people off from their lives very easily and quickly when relationships get too intimate or when people start to criticize them. And again, they can derive a twisted pride in their ability to do so because it suggests to them subconsciously that they truly do not need other people, that they are independent, that they are autonomous. But really, this is often a coping mechanism to hide from themselves how deeply they are hurt by relationships. These natives subconsciously do want to be in loving and intimate relationships, but their trust in other people and other people's capacity to love them has been broken. For this reason, it becomes safer for them to cling to these false philosophies of total independence and not needing other people. To belabor the point a little further, they can feel very unloved, even early on in life, because when they try to innocently be themselves, fully and without shame, they find that they somehow tend to make everyone around them angry or uncomfortable or otherwise unhappy. It is as if they are trying to yawn and stretch their arms, but in so doing, they poke out the eye of the person standing right next to them. It is as if they are trying to occupy enough space so that they themselves can be comfortable. But in so doing, they are constantly accused of suffocating other people around them. It becomes confusing as to how to be themselves without intruding other people's space. Some of them end up deciding that intimate relationships are too much work and are not for them, and become resistant to such things like marriage. It becomes quite the dilemma for Uttara Phalguni, who feels as though in order to exist within a relationship, they must limit, must restrict, or must constrict themselves to the point where they themselves start to feel like they can't breathe. And because they are not naturally too in tune with social etiquette, it becomes very confusing to them as to how to limit themselves intelligently. Relationships become difficult for them because though they do want to experience love, relationships can often feel like a very confusing prison. It is as if they are constantly forced to choose between love and freedom. This is also why they actually are very compatible with Saturnians, who naturally desire to limit their own personalities and make their own selves and identities smaller, which allows for the full expression of Sun Nakshatra personalities. The Saturnian spouse is more willing than most to simply play a supporting role, as the Uttara Phalguni spouse allows himself to be spontaneous, adventurous, focus on work, or otherwise fully express his identity. And this is also why Uttara Phalguni women are referred to as the ideal spouse, because the women of this nakshatra tend to be the least neurotic, the least controlling, and the least emotionally volatile. The women of Uttara Phalguni are very good at giving space to their male partners to fully be themselves without interruption or limitation. They do not emasculate their men and in fact are very good at encouraging masculinity without needing to antagonize their spouse. So the women of Uttara Phalguni make space for masculinity for their men and also are very much appreciated by men who are less naturally masculine because they encourage masculinity in them. Again, whereas other types of women may either emasculate men or antagonize them as a means of inspiring masculinity through challenge, Uttara Phalguni women understand how to provide a safe space for a less masculine man to grow into their own masculinity, For example, she would encourage him to be more adventurous, to be more independent, to be more career focused, and act as his support. Uttara Phalguni natives are often very externally focused, and for this reason are less naturally inclined to deep introspection of their own emotional nature, which often makes them rather ignorant of very deep subconscious thoughts and motivations. They don't enjoy navel gazing about themselves, nor do they enjoy endlessly reflecting on the past or their own wounds. So even when they are deeply wounded, it can be very difficult to stop them long enough for them to sit and contemplate themselves, their own feelings and the feelings of others. This ignorance of their own feelings and the feelings of others also leads to behaviors that other people consider thoughtless, inconsiderate, self-centered, selfish. They can treat other people's emotions as though they were inconveniences. They don't like to withdraw within themselves too much, nor reflect upon darker and more serious subjects. They generally prefer to be light, both of body and spirit, and so may even make light of themselves, make fun of themselves and other people, and change the subject anytime it gets too severe. It is common for them to actually be very ignorant of their own subconscious motivations to behave a certain way. For example, an Uttara Phalguni native could actually be jealous or vindictive, and these emotions and motivations may be obvious to those around them, but less obvious to the Uttara Phalguni native himself. They really benefit a lot from writing and the production of arts, because even when they aren't making art for the purpose of self-reflection, by externalizing their emotions, it becomes easier to observe and discover themselves. By externalizing their emotions into art and into writing, and then going back and reading and studying their own artworks, they can arrive at a deeper understanding of their own nature. Through observing their art and their creations, they often arrive at a deeper understanding of their own motivations. Essentially, they discovered themselves through seeing themselves reflected externally, much like how the sun discovers itself through having its own light reflected back to it from the moon.